Welcome to the True Talk Café podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited you're here. Our podcast will tackle a myriad of topics, ranging from relationships to personal development and everything in between. My name is Renee Stewart, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ana Garcia, Carla Decor, and Lali Ramirez Bennett. Collectively, we span 4 generations. Can you believe that? We've all experienced ups and downs in our personal lives and professional careers that have qualified us to share our unique perspectives with you, and we're excited to do so. But before we get into today's content, I wanted to let you know where you can find us on social media. On Instagram and Facebook, you can use @TrueTalkCafe, and on Twitter, you can use @TrueTalkCafe1. Don't forget to like us, rate us, and leave a review. We value your feedback. We want to ensure that we are providing content that resonates with you. So please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts. Spoiler alert, you will want to stay tuned to hear what our guests are going to share about this exciting topic today. Also, stick around to find out how you can join us on a live show. We would love to have you join us on one of our episodes. Now, let's get started. Welcome to the True Talk Cafe podcast. I have a question for you. Is your company embracing pay transparency? How confident are you when it comes to negotiating your salary? Well, pay transparency is on the rise, and in some areas, it's even required by law. Surprised? In today's episode, we're calling Show Me the Money. We dive into what pay transparency really means, how it benefits both employees and employers, and we'll share some smart strategies to help employees negotiate the best compensation package. So, Lali, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely, Renee. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So when it comes to pay transparency, it's a strategy for talking about employee salaries within the company. This idea may seem taboo, but it's become more mainstream over the years with the uptick in legislation to make pay transparency a legal requirement. In fact, it's been illegal for employers to punish employees for discussing their wages since 1935. That was when the National Labor Relations Act was passed. As more pay transparency laws are enacted, younger generations enter the workforce, open communication in the workplace is expected to be more commonplace. However, many people aren't used to talking about money publicly. It's just not something that they've ever been used to. As we dig a little deeper into this topic, we've invited an expert in this field to share her thoughts. Please give a warm welcome to Karina Izaguirre. Karina is a founder and CEO of Accelerate Wellness 360, a consulting firm that partners with companies to develop tailored strategies that integrate wellness into their culture and operations, leading to improved employee engagement, retention, productivity, and overall business performance. Karina is an HR executive with over 25 years of experience in human-centric business solutions and has held various HR leadership roles in global and domestic organizations in both the public and private sector. Karina has a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from the University of Houston, Clear Lake, and is a certified senior professional in human resources, certified as an employee relations expert and change management practitioner. Welcome, Karina.
Thank you, Renee and Dr. Carla. Thanks for having me. Happy to join this exciting conversation on pay transparency. It's an important topic.
Thank you. We're excited to have you here.
Yes, we're definitely excited to have you. Thank you for being here and taking some time to share some of the knowledge and information that you have with our podcasters and our audience. So let's start from the beginning. What steps should employers take when transitioning from a non-transparent to a transparent salary model?
I actually had the opportunity to lead that change in my previous organization. I was the vice president of people services. And as part of my scope, I had total rewards, which includes compensation, benefits, technology, people operations, and several other serviced functions. I got there in 2022, and California was putting in place the California Pay Transparency in January 2023. We had very little time to prepare, but one of the first things is for organizations to prepare. Be aware of what's coming when the laws are changing and be prepared. But this isn't just about complying with the law, right? It really is a culture shift for the entire organization. Even if you're just doing it for a certain state, I think now there's 11 plus states that do have pay transparency laws in some ways, pay transparency laws in some jurisdictions. So you do have to pay attention to each state and cities where you operate in, because they are moving very, very swiftly with these changes. So we had to quickly evaluate our position. And I think for every organization, there's always internal equity challenges, especially organizations that are growing through acquisition. Oftentimes, right, they'll go and acquire a company, and oftentimes those companies you've acquired maybe didn't have or don't have the greatest pay policies in place. So now you've acquired a population that is out of step from what you already have in your current organization, and you have to match them. So in this organization where I was, that was a kind of a situation that we were dealing with, multiple acquisitions over the years. And it's hard for an organization to keep up and increase salaries or modify or salaries overnight. Typically, you have to budget these things. The organization still has to, manage their margins and so on. So it has to definitely be a planned effort. The challenge that we faced was California and a few other states were going with pay transparency. But basically what the expectation is from pay transparency laws is you have to now disclose the salary range on all your job postings in that state where you're going to operate in or post jobs. So we had a decision to make. Do we only do it for the jobs in the states in which that's required, or do we just do it across the board? And it was a tough choice, but our leadership team decided we're going to do it across the board. It just sent a better transparency message for the workforce. We're also very remote and distributed. It was going to be very administratively difficult for us to say, but this job's only in California, but actually that person might travel to other states. So it just didn't make for a clean integration of these policies. So we decided to go all in. It was a big move. It was a big change. It did require education. It was to do a lot of analysis of our current state to see were we about to embark on open up a can of worms kind of thing, right? So we had to evaluate where everyone was. And it was actually a good exercise for me because I was just new to the organization. So I was able to do a clean sort of evaluation of all the jobs in the organization. We had 4,000 people and all the different jobs, levels, and so on. And then we created the bands, to post publicly. But again, the advice for any organizations, don't go into it blindly. Definitely review your jobs, review your job families, look at your pay bands, look at people in the jobs, and know what you're getting into. Everyone's going to have somebody that's below market, or there's going to be some inequities, but know them so that when somebody comes to you, you're not blindsided by a lawsuit or anything like that. You have an action plan to correct it.
What would you say are the pros and cons of salary transparency within the organization?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a lot of pros. Transparency shows that you're building trust in your organization. It's a culture of open communication. It helps with hiring, that people, your hiring managers and your recruiters are all, staying within an assigned range for the job, and it creates more accountability. The cons are, it is a culture shift, and most organizations probably haven't yet educated all their managers on how to have that conversation. Compensation has been sort of that secret, behind the closed doors conversations that HR people tend to have in the hiring, yes or no. And there's like 10 steps in between that typically get missed. And the manager just kind of goes, well, that's what HR told me to do. Right. And that has now been flipped on its head. And now the manager has to know exactly why that is the range and exactly who to put on the lower end of the range and who to put on the higher end of the range. And it has to be, basically the managers have to be a lot more savvy and educated on compensation matters. And they should be, right? They're making decisions, sometimes $1 million decisions on customer jobs and clients and other things and assets in the organization. We have to trust them to manage their people's salary and makes good salary decisions and know the implications. So I would say the biggest con is how far behind we are in educating managers. It's better now. Let's get started, because the sooner we start, the sooner that the next generation are going to be in a better position to have a supportive manager.
How can employers maintain fairness and equity in pay while managing salary transparency?
Yeah, it really does start with the job descriptions. I'll give you an example of why that's so important, because in organizations, especially smaller and growing entrepreneurial companies, you often find that jobs will be made up and people will be placed in the job. The job description really matters, right? That's how you price the job. If you get that wrong, it's like baking a cake. If you get the wrong recipe, you're not going to get a cake. You're going to get a muffin or something else, right? So that's exactly what a job description is. It's a recipe for the qualifications, the education, the experience, the skills that you need to be successful in that job. And someone that meets all of those expectations or all those criteria for that job should be in the midpoint, or exceeds those expectations, should be on the higher end. If you're barely, if you're just starting out and you don't really meet all those expectations for that job, it's okay to be on the lower end of that range. However, what we sometimes find is managers will basically put someone in a job, right? Because every company has a list of jobs, and then you open the requisition and you can put them in the job, and not take into account how dangerous it is to give somebody a job title that they're not qualified for, right? Maybe they're trying to be nice. This happened in an organization where I worked at. I had somebody, she's a female, she came to me and she says, I am being treated unfairly. I know what my peers make. They're making way more than me. They're at, I don't know, I think it was like 150 and I'm at 100. Like, that's a huge disparity. But what are the differences? Come to find out, her manager had promoted her to this job title to kind of make her happy. She had been asking about pay. She wanted a bump in pay. And he's like, well, I'll give you this job, but didn't pay her equitable to her peer group, even though her peers had a whole different set of criteria and qualifications. In the eyes of the law, they say, you chose to promote her and treat her like that. That's on you. So as employers, there's some very real legal implications when we don't look after those job descriptions, making sure that those are clear, updating those on a regular basis, pricing them correctly, and then making sure that we are helping our managers put people in the right jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Job descriptions are definitely key. So if you're going from a non-transparent pay structure to a transparent, you have to go back and look at your job descriptions, right? That can be a lot of work, but if you're going to make the shift, you have to make sure those job descriptions are correct based on your job titles, and make sure that your salary bands and whatever promotable verticals that you have within those salary bands are consistent, right? Or else you are going to run into some situations. So my follow-up question to that is, how can employers create a more transparent culture around pay without causing friction between employees?
I think the transparency goes beyond just the job postings, right? Because once the job posting's out there, everyone can see, what that job is. I think the transparency has to go into the educating not just managers, but also employees, making it visible. What is compensation? What is the policy? What is your compensation policy? What is your philosophy? Do you believe in merit? Do you believe in pay for performance? Is it seniority based? How do I get a raise around here? That's the question people have, right? Or how do I get promoted around here? So I don't think pay transparency in and of itself creates friction. The disparities of how managers or the organization implements them, or the decisions they make. For example, the job is posted, the range is on there, but then people apply and you hire someone that, your neighbor's brother-in-law's cousin, right? So I think some of that hurts the trust and causes the friction, because then people feel like, okay, you're doing the right things and putting the right policies. You've educated me, but the practice is not fair, right? So I think employees have to see the organization being fair, interviewing people internally if there's a job. In previous roles, encouraged managers to have an annual career development conversation, more frequently if you can, right? But at minimum, once a year, and ask your employees to put time on the calendar. Hey, we're going to talk about your career. And then part of that conversation is their development, and part of that conversation is their compensation, even if it's outside of the merit cycle and all that. And I like to ask employees or people on my team, do you feel fairly compensated? And you'd be surprised how many people actually say yes. Yes, but I'd like to get more exposure to the board. Yes, but I'd like to be able to travel and see some of the customer sites. That's not always just money. Most people, I would say at least half of the people are going to value development even more than just a little bit more money.
I would definitely agree with you. My background is HR as well. I require our folks to have a individual development plan.
Yeah.
They must have. They have to review it at least twice a year, because we like to hit you mid-year to make sure you're on track and see if the employee is doing their part, because it is a partnership.
That's a great practice.
Yeah, definitely. Lolly, you have the next question?
Getting that really helps in terms of understanding that it's not always the pay that people want, right? It is important. So far we've talked about it from a business point of view. Now I'd like to shift it a little bit in terms of asking you, how can an employee advocate for fair compensation without being perceived as overly aggressive? And I'm going to kind of throw a second one in there because I think they're kind of related. How can you approach that salary conversation if you know your peers are making more than you?
Yeah. I get this question sometimes. Hey, I want to talk about my pay with my boss, and I know that I'm making less because so-and-so and so-and-so told me, should I tell my boss that? My position on that is no. I don't think you need to tell your boss. I'll tell you why. Your boss already knows what everybody makes in the department, and you telling them is just telling him or her, we're all talking about our pay and we think you're, like they're internalizing it, right?
Right.
And it's just my experience. I'm not saying that that's how I personally take it. I have like thick skin. I can take anything. I have worked with so many managers that just cannot handle people talking about things, right? They can't retaliate. They can't treat you different. They're protected by law with all these things. And you're now just giving them additional information that might hurt their sensitive egos. And it's like, why go there? So focus on you. Don't give them any other reason to build a case against you. Every culture is different, right? So if you have an awesome relationship with your boss and your boss isn't toxic and all that great stuff, then all power to you. You can probably handle that conversation very professionally. But a lot of organizations, again, still have managers that haven't been educated on these conversations. And so I would just focus it on yourself and just say, consider what value you've added. Have you taken on additional work, additional projects? Like a lot of companies right now are laying off. You probably have taken on more work, right? You're probably helping in another department, or you have a project, or any of those reasons. Just like we talked about on the business side, be prepared and do your homework on the business side. Look at your job descriptions, analyze your employees, salary basis. I've been in those shoes and I did all the research. I was able to identify all the reasons why I felt like I deserved this salary increase. I did a percentage and where that would take me from here to here. You can have a verbal conversation, then follow up and say, hey, per our conversations, thanks for listening to me. Here's my recommendation or here's my proposal. Please let me know what you think. That way, at least if they don't give that to you and then later on you resign, at least you tried. What you don't want your manager to do is, well, why didn't you talk to me? I would have tried to save you, before you quit. And then you can say, well, at least I did try to tell you this. And they might actually try to counter when you give your notice. And again, that's another decision that you have to make at that point. But do your homework, be prepared. Don't talk about anybody else. Just talk about you and don't be afraid to do it. You can definitely do it very professionally. It doesn't have to be a scary conversation. I think you say, can we have a conversation? Can I meet with you? I want to talk to you about my development, about my career. And then you kind of fit in the salary conversation in there. If you say, can I talk to you about my salary? I've seen managers actually postpone or cancel or not show up. You have to say, hey, can I just talk to you about development? I have some questions. And then in that conversation, you're going to bring up, and by the way, I pay. Hopefully that's
Very
helpful.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
That is really great.
In my organization, Our managers do not know the salaries. They don't. Only the assistant vice president level. We've had employees come to their managers, and their managers are well educated on how to have that conversation. I've had people come in my office after they've resigned, and they're like, well, I didn't know. I'm like, oh, why didn't you come to me? They're like, well, I talked to my manager, but, the manager didn't say anything. So it definitely comes down to educating.
Yeah.
Both the management team and the employees.
And I work for a public institution. So I work for a university, and all our salaries are actually public. So everyone knows how much people make at a university. So that does create a lot of uncomfortable conversations because they know how much someone makes. They can easily see if they are making less. The next question is, what are some common mistakes people make when negotiating their salary, and how can they perhaps avoid them? And I know you kind of mentioned a few things, but is there anything else that you can think of that people can do to better handle salary negotiations, especially if they are maybe transitioning from one job to another within the same company or even externally?
Yeah, I think that's such a timely thing right now with the younger generations. My daughter's 24, right? I'm having these conversations with her, right? And I was her age at one point, and I had to learn things. And so we have to remind ourselves there's definitely these generations that are coming up that don't know these things. And so I've had these conversations with people, and I had this one young lady tell me one time, well, I always start when the recruiter asked me, what's your salary expectations? I always give them the low end because then I can go up from there. If you start on the low end, that's kind of what they're going to give you. That's just the way it is. My recommendation is always, again, be prepared to know what the range is for the job. This is going to facilitate these things for our young generation that doesn't have to guess, and it's going to be out there for them to see. They should know there's so much information out there now, but they should be prepared. Don't start on the low end, and actually try to avoid them an actual number. I always prefer to say, what is the range for the job? What are you looking to pay? Do you have a target for the position? Are you willing to share that? And even say, I'm looking for fair market value for the position. I think I meet all the qualifications for the job. Then, of course, if they press you for a number, then fine, give them a number. In Texas, they can still do that. But I've even recently not shared a number and just kind of said, I would like to stay within the fair market value. I think I meet all the qualifications of the position. And then just kind of be quiet. Then great, you've given them an answer. Sometimes they do press, and sometimes, you do have to give a number. I would say don't go low just because you're afraid to lose the job opportunity, because all that's going to happen is if you go low, then that's what they're going to give you. And then you're going to say, dang it, I should have said a higher number. Then you're not going to be happy in the job. Then you're going to be having this difficult conversation 6 months later, right? When you should have had it up front. Be courageous, be strong in your value and what you know your value is. If it's not the right opportunity, the next one will come. That's how we fix the pay gap, is not undervaluing ourselves, because organizations obviously have difficult budgets to meet. And if you give them a lower number, that's exactly what they're going to do.
And one thing that I remember an attorney told us in the past to a group of women that were having this discussion was to also look at other things that you can negotiate depending on the company, right? Like, what are some of the maybe recommendations that you have on other things that they can also negotiate if maybe the salary is not as flexible?
Yeah, absolutely. From, early to mid-career, you can still ask for more vacation. You can ask for a sign-on bonus. If you're leaving a job and leaving a bonus on the table, you can say, can you make me whole, right? And they might do that in the form of a sign-on bonus. Tuition reimbursement, you can negotiate that. I see this more on mid to senior level jobs, asking for an employment agreement where you get a severance package if you lose your job, right? That seems a little bit more prevalent in executive roles, but you can ask for that. Equity, stock options, those are all things that can be negotiated. What am I missing? Perks, car allowance,
stock options,
your commission rate if you're in sales, potentially, they might do something special for you depending on how bad they want you or how much value you bring to the organization.
To that, if you are entry level, but you feel that maybe you have 1 or 2 years that maybe they might start you at a lower salary, but then after 6 months, maybe you negotiate another second look to see if they pop you back, up another 500, 100,000, 2,000 or whatever it is to get you there. Because when you're coming in, you really haven't proven yourself yet. So if you can come in there and, your performance quality is high potential level, and then maybe they do that second look and can pop you up. So that's what I suggest for more of your entry level people coming in.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I negotiated in the past for a sales job was to get salary only for the first year and compensation after the second, but the first year was much higher. But you just have to ask, right? It doesn't hurt to ask. They can always say no.
Yeah, there's sometimes companies will pay a bridge. Like, let's say, you might get a lower commission rate or a flat rate for 3 months while you're learning the job. And you might say, can you extend that to 4 months, 5 months, 6 months? And they might say no, right? But you can ask, especially if it just depends on the circumstances. I would say it's important to not just ask for a bunch of things. I think it's like, have the logic for them, right? You might say, well, I'm switching industries completely. It might take me a little bit longer to ramp up. Are you willing to extend that 3-month bridge to 4 months, or 5 months? What kind of training am I going to get? I found this training. Are you willing to pay for this? It's a lot better conversation when you've just done the thought around it and give them reasons to say yes.
And I just learned that in higher education, especially positions that are a little bit higher, they also do have those severance agreements. So it's always important that if you are in any type of public service, higher education, and you're going into a higher role, that you do have a contract. A lot of people think that that's only for faculty, but it's not only for faculty. It is essentially for all executives as well.
Yeah.
So
Another recommendation around your benefits, you were saying, maybe you can negotiate more vacation. And even if you can't, sometimes they'll want you to come in and your vacation, you have to wait to accrue it. Maybe you can front load 1 or 2 weeks. You know what I mean? If they're going to give you 3 weeks, maybe you can front load 1 week or 2 weeks, because that helps out. But one other thing that I would say not to do, okay, as I'd like to have more vacation because my family typically takes this many vacations, or, don't give them the explanation, right? This is just know your worth. This is what you're asking for. You don't have to tell them because you plan to go to New Zealand, at the end of the year or anything like that, because they don't care. Because they're looking at, wait a second, you're a new employee here and you want this vacation and then you're going to go to New Zealand for 3 weeks?
Yeah, right. I would also add is don't accept right on the spot, think about it because you may have missed something, right? Even all the preparation in the world, you just in the moment, we all forget something. So just say, thank you so much for the offer. I'm so excited. Can you send it over to me in writing? Because a lot of times they'll just call you and do a verbal. Can you just send it over to me so I can take a look at it tonight and I'll get back to you in the next day? Don't take too long, right? But then evaluate it and then come back to them with the counter. I also want to say oftentimes, especially in professional roles, the manager has an approval to go a little bit higher, or to give you a sign on. So oftentimes they've already got it. They're expecting you to counter. And then oftentimes people don't. This happened to me with someone that I hired. I think I may have mentioned this on another call, but I was expecting her to counter and ask for more money or ask for a sign-on bonus because she was leaving a bonus behind. And when the recruiter came back and she says, no, she accepted on the spot. We're good. And she's Latina, so I'm just like, oh, this is why.
Yeah, we do that a lot.
And I told the recruiter, I said, call her back and tell her that we're giving her sign-on because she's leaving a bonus on the table in her other company. And I don't need that on my conscience.
That's good for you.
That. And she's like, no, we don't have to do it. But not all companies would do that, right? It's just not what they've been taught to do. And so why this conversation is so important when we talk about equal pay is so that managers and if you're a decision maker, right, you have the power to contribute positively to closing the gap. It's better for you because a year from now, that person you're bringing on, that great talent, is not going to be coming to you to say, you know what, I left money on the table. You're just preempting something that's probably going to happen down the road if you don't do it right up front.
Can I ask one more thing very quickly? So One of the things that we often I am seeing, a lot of jobs don't have the salary posted or salary range posted. When is at the right time then to ask for salary while you're going through the interview process? And
That's a
how
good
does
question.
someone ask that?
I like to just wait until they bring it up. Be patient. If they want you, they're going to start talking to you about that. Some recruiters will get that out of the way right off the bat, especially if they suspect that you're on the higher end of the range and very competitive. They're screening people out that are asking for too much money right off the bat. So I would say it's going to happen. I wouldn't get too anxious about it. If they're calling on you, they're interviewing you, follow the process, trust the process, have a great resume, do an awesome cover letter, do your thank you letters to everyone that you interviewed with, do your follow-ups. You don't have to ask about pay. It's going to come. Be ready. Use that time to practice, right? Because then they're going to hit you up and you're like, damn, I messed up that conversation all that time. You could have been preparing. I did this for so many years and a manager taught me this and I was like, I would have never thought to do this. Write a script, right? And you guys do podcasts, but you're probably familiar with scripts, right? But write a script and practice it in front of the mirror. I promise you, it changes everything. You're going to be so much more confident. It's not so much what you're going to say, it's how you're going to say it. Because people can read confidence. People can tell when you actually mean it, when you're asking for that increase or that salary, that additional bump in pay or that additional $5,000 or even $2,000 to your base. They can tell when you're just kind of like, well, can you, they can tell and they'll easily say no to that because they know that you're not confident in asking that. So if you practiced it, I promise you it's going to come across.
Very, very good. Thank you, Karina. I took quite a bit of notes on that. The other thing that I've seen people actually ask about is remote working from home, especially if they are a distance from the office, right? And lately, I've also seen people say, maybe give a number up front too early. And I always tell them, hey, it's never too late to go back and renegotiate it. Sometimes they may not be willing to, but now that you know the full scope of the job, I really feel that I am at this level. Have your list of things. So like you said, be confident, prepare, practice, and know your value, know your worth, right? That makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for that insight. That's so huge. And I think it helps our audience be better prepared as they try to either figure out when they're going to have that conversation, or if they're at a point of maybe looking for a new position, et cetera, then be better prepared in that respect. I want to share with everyone some key statistics related to compensation negotiations that can provide some insight into trends and behavior in the workplace that we're seeing right now. Negotiation success rates. Do you know that 70% of the people who negotiate their salary successfully receive higher pay as a result? And how many of us don't even try it? Only 37% of employees actually negotiate their initial salary offer.
Oh, wow.
Only 37% of employees actually negotiate their initial salary offer. Yet 70% of them actually are able to make it worth their time, right? No surprise here. On average, women earn about 82 cents for every dollar earned by men. That varies by race and culture, of course, but part of the gap can be attributed to the differences in their negotiation behaviors, with men are more likely to negotiate their salary than women. I was told recently by another HR manager that almost always men will negotiate. Women will rarely ever negotiate. Men are 4 times more likely to negotiate their first salary than women. Now, let's talk about generational differences. Millennials and Gen Z workers are increasingly negotiating their salaries. Around 46% of millennials report negotiating their salary after receiving an offer, compared to 39% of Gen Xers and 33% of baby boomers. I mentioned earlier, there's some racial disparities in salary negotiations. Research shows that Blacks and Hispanic employees are less likely to negotiate compared to their white counterparts. Black employees are about 20% less likely to negotiate than a white employee. So I'm going to tell you that when it comes down to the expectations, about 80% of employers are open to salary negotiation. That's shocking to me because most people are so afraid to ask, right? Yet 80% of them are waiting for you to ask. However, many candidates are unaware of this. And again, only 31% of the people consistently negotiate their pay. Confidence plays a key role in salary negotiation success. That's what Karina told us. And the statistics tell us the same thing. About 57% of employees who negotiated their salary felt confident doing so, compared to 42% who didn't negotiate because they lacked confidence. So make sure you're not leaving that money, or as Renee said, show me the money, right? We got to be the ones to advocate for ourselves.
Awesome. So let's talk about some tips. And I know we have shared quite a few already. Let's start with the first one that we mentioned a few times. Do your research. I personally have done that, and it did help me tremendously. To say specifically, I noticed that the average pay in this specific position in this market is between this and this. When you bring those numbers, they do make a difference. I literally had the person that was hiring me scratch off the amount that they had on the offer letter and put the amount that I asked for. So it does make a huge difference. Know your value. Identify your unique skills, accomplishments, and contributions. Highlight your successes and how you've added value to the company or the team or even the industry. That's something that, I did with a friend of mine not too long ago because I was trying to help him. But I said, come on, let's do it together. Let's write down all of the projects that you completed and all the things that you've accomplished. And that did help me also see all of the things that I've done in just 2 years. So it does help. Be ready to discuss the full compensation package. So don't get so honed in only on the salary. Remember, it's only a part of the compensation. Consider other benefits like we mentioned. That includes the bonuses, equity, health benefits, retirement contributions, remote work, options, flexible hours, additional vacation days, and so on. Write down a script, practice it in front of the mirror, maybe practice it with your spouse or a friend, so you can be confident in what you're asking for. Practice how you present your case and emphasize how your skills and contributions truly align with the company's goals. And this is why you're deserving of that pay that you're asking for. Timing is the next one, and it is important. Time your negotiation strategically. So again, don't ask too early. Wait till the right time. Like Karina said, I agree with her 100%. For example, performance reviews after a significant achievement, or when you've been offered a new role, or if you're applying for a new position, wait until they bring it up, and then you can just have that discussion. The next is a salary range too early. So if they ask you about salary expectations early in the process, try to delay it until you have a clear idea of the company's offer, what they offer, and just say, I'd like to discuss the salary once we both determine whether I'm the right fit for the role. If the offer is lower than you expected, be prepared to counteroffer and back with some market data. What is the value that you bring to the company? Focus on collaboration and not conflict. So, depending on how you handle conflict, what's your face, your body language, how do you respond will matter. So approach the conversation as a discussion, not as a demand. Yes, you want to have confidence, but you don't want to, be demanding of what you want. Consider the long term while negotiating. Think about the long-term opportunities like promotions, career growth, and company stability. Someone mentioned maybe thinking about doing something that is 6 months down the line when you can be reviewed again and see how they can potentially review your salary and compensation as well. Last, stay professional and flexible. If the employer cannot meet your salary expectations, explore other avenues of compensation or ask when you can revisit the discussion. And always remain professional and open to alternatives. We're hoping that these tips can kind of help you compensate with your compensation negotiations so you can approach them with confidence and tact, ensuring a better chance for mutually beneficial outcomes. Hopefully that is helpful.
While accepting an employer's initial offer to avoid an uncomfortable situation is often tempting, doing so can result in a missed opportunity if the salary doesn't align with your expectations. So make sure you speak about it up front, or again, to the point that I think Carla just mentioned, Renee mentioned it as well. It's lay it down that you'd like to review it in 6 months. Let's come back to this and know that I'm not quite where I want to be. And I really want to make sure that I can show you I'm well worth that extra money. Do your research and be prepared to negotiate a salary that you deserve.
I mean, it was so many nuggets of wisdom here that Karina shared with us. And, we hope that our listeners are going to take notes while they listen to this podcast. I know that we did. So we're going to be prepared for the future. I'd like to thank all of our listeners and our special guest, Karina Izagari. Karina, would you like to share how our listeners can connect with you if they'd like to do so?
Sure. Karina Izagari. I am on LinkedIn, the same name, or you can go to my website, www.acceleratewellness360.com. Engage with me there and reach out to me on email, Karina@acceleratewellness360.com as well. So I look forward to hearing from you folks. If you need assistance with your salary negotiations or just need to chat, I'm happy to do that. So thanks for having me here in the True Talk Cafe. This is amazing. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, thank you so much, Karina. And I'll make sure that I include all of your connection points with the show notes so our folks can go ahead and connect with you there. This was definitely an impactful discussion. And I have a couple of takeaways that I'd like to share with our audience. First, as employers seek to break down invisible barriers affecting the candidate and employee experience, embracing pay transparency could certainly help. Unfortunately, we know that pay transparency is not always straightforward. So make sure that you do your research, right? There's no one way to have pay transparency, and it's going to depend on the company and the culture. Number two, remember that advanced preparation will not only maximize the potential for a better compensation package, but will also show that you've done your homework, as we've discussed earlier, and that you know your value, as well as the market rate of the position of interest. We'd love to hear about your experience negotiating your compensation package if you'd like to share that with us. You can share that in the comments. When you listen to the podcast, we would really like to read those to see what type of experience you've had. We hope you learned something new or came away with something of value on this topic. As promised, here's how to join us as an audience member on our next show episode. Go to our True Talk Cafe Facebook page and send us a request to attend Season 3, Episode 10 as an audience member. Be sure to use the hashtag TTC S3EP10. That's TTC S3EP10. We will respond to your requests with our podcast website link, where you'll need to enter your preferred email address for us to send the audience link. We'll also send our audience members a reminder the day before the show recording. We welcome your feedback, so please let us know your thoughts about today's show. Leave a comment or review. We will respond to all comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts about today's topic. Please do not forget to like and rate the episode. We appreciate you tuning into our podcast, and we hope you join the TTC Crew Facebook page. Again, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook using @TrueTalkCafe, and on X, formerly Twitter, using @TrueTalkCafe1. Please use the hashtag TTC Talks or True Talk Tuesdays. Recommendations for discussion topics are always welcome. We want to ensure we are providing content that is of value to you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for listening, and we hope you join us on our next episode. It's sure to be an engaging conversation. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.